This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is going on, everyone? Hope you had a great weekend. Man, it was nice on Saturday. Couldn't believe we touched 30 degrees in early May before May long weekend, but we will absolutely take it. A lot of great sports on the weekend as well to get to on today's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, as well as the latest on the Jets coaching search. And what's interesting is we now actually have some odds been put together by our friends at Coolbet, so we'll let you know about that. Sean Reynolds is going to jump on. We'll see what Rennie's takes are on the options for the Winnipeg Jets, where we think things will go. We'll also talk Stanley Cup Playoffs, and of course, the Bombers are back. Training camp officially underway after a smoke delay yesterday. The Hammer, Jeff Hamilton, will pop on. We'll certainly get to the Bombers. Jeff has been, right from the get-go, all over the Chad Kelly story in Toronto. We will touch on that as well, and I'm sure Jeff will have some takes on the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. So it should be a fun one. We'll have some time a little later on to get into the NBA lines for tonight, as well as what happened on the weekend. And, of course, it is PGA Championship week. And big win for Rory McIlroy on the weekend. We'll get to a little Breezy Bend golf report later on and look ahead to the PGA Championship as well. So busy show today. Great to have you all with us. And a special belated, no, I know we did wish everyone happy Mother's Day on Monday, or on Friday, I should say. But I hope all you moms out there had a wonderful, wonderful Mother's Day. And now it's back to the other 364 days a year where you do all the heavy lifting and maybe don't get the appreciation that you deserve. But anyways, hope all the moms had a great one yesterday, especially ours. All right, just before we bring in Reem, got to thank the sponsors that make our show happen each and every day. Rolly's Transfer, Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Consolidated Supply, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, Canadian Club, Modern Man Barbershop and Manitoba Battery, Hoagie Boys, down on South Osborne, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, Assiniboia Downs, Breezy Bend, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, and we will get to a why not question of the day for the gang at Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get Michael Remis in here as we get the week underway. Reem, what's going on? How was your Mother's Day? Did you spoil and pamper your wife, who does, speaking of heavy lifting, certainly the brains of the operation in and around the Remis household? We're just waiting for Remo to get back in here in a second. I am just looking at, yes, WST scored the national media. You're damn right. We will have Rennie jump on with us in just a minute. We're gonna get Remo back in here in just a sec. I think he had the the perfect timing of somebody running into on an appointment that was supposed to be in the morning. Reem, just while you were taking care of that,
what's going on?
How was Mother's Day at your house? Did you spoil and pamper your the brains of the operation over there at Remis HQ?
Yeah, we had a couple functions with my family and her family, and then I let my wife relax, put her feet up, took both kids out, did a nice Costco run with 2 kids, Superstore, went out for a couple hours. So it was fun. What did I do? Had a nice diaper change in the men's stall at Costco yesterday. That was a lot of fun. That was an experience. So it was good times. Good. I think it was good.
You know what? You're a guy that knows all about things that people will watch on YouTube.
Yes.
I would go pay-per-view to have you mic'd up and a camera just of you with 2 little kids rolling through Costco.
It was great
to have that mic'd up and streamed. That would be the stream that would set all records for WST. That it would be so funny. I'm just thinking, that's cracking me up.
That was fun. I mean, it's easy. You just put them both in this not gonna say stroller, but in the shopping cart. They're big shopping carts there. So I had a good time. I was happy to let my wife relax a little on Mother's Day while I took the kids out. So good times.
Nicely done. Listen, we've got a lot to get to, and I know there's already talk, and I mean, this is going to happen pretty much every day, where people are going to get in here and get all over the latest on the Winnipeg Jet coaching search. And, we've heard a little bit from Elliot Friedman. Darren Drager's got an interesting one. We're going to get to both of those, but I do wonder, Reem, of course, it's today's day and age with social media. It just took somebody with a camera phone to be on a plane and recognize Todd McClellan getting on a direct flight from LAX to Toronto to kind of drop some breaking news. The Jets notoriously are pretty tight-lipped and pretty quiet. I was thinking this morning of how, listen, there's a bunch of jobs open. The national media, not Rennie, but like the greater national media pay more attention to certain teams than Winnipeg. And I'm kind of trying to wonder whether this is just going to come up and we're going to find out a couple of interviews have happened and then there's going to be going on, or whether we'll sort of have a little more detail through the process as to who's getting interviews, who's interested in the job. And I think that, were some of the other jobs in the league not open, we might get a little bit more info. But as of right now, it's been relatively quiet. But that shouldn't, I think, surprise anybody, considering the way the Jets traditionally go about their business.
Yeah, we don't usually hear a lot from the Jets, and no shocker that someone is tracking someone on a flight to Toronto during a free agency watch. Scardy saying is McClellan on the same flight as Ohtani in chat. The jokes are flying, and we're not really hearing a ton about the Jets. Mostly about Toronto. They're the big one. What Elliott reporting, what they talked to Berube and McClellan, and also reports about New Jersey's interest in Sheldon Keefe and Todd McClellan as well. So not a ton about the Jets. It seems like Toronto, Drager saying he thinks they're going to get it done quickly. New Jersey as well, and maybe once those dominoes fall, we'll have some clarity on what's going to happen with the Winnipeg Jets.
Here, let's we got a couple clips here. This is from today's 32 Thoughts. Elliot briefly touched on Winnipeg's situation and said he wouldn't be surprised if they talked to Sheldon Keefe, and then mentioned a bit of a history with Todd McClellan for the general manager.
I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to talk to Keefe. Kevin Cheveldayoff and Todd McClellan have a long history. I'm not sure, though, that that's going to be where they go.
Okay, I wrecked that clip. I'm sorry. Hold on. I don't know what happened there.
Listen, we talked a little bit before. McClellan is a guy that, he's coached in, Edmonton and San Jose and LA, very respected coach with a good a track record. Listen, if you've been there, you've also been fired in a bunch of places. So, depends, I guess, on who you talk to. But he is going to be a guy that is, of particular interest to a number of teams. We mentioned he's interviewing in Toronto. Berube for that point. I mean, a lot of people thought that it was going to be Berube right up before Keefe was even fired, Remis, but it does seem like the Leafs, in addition to other teams like Winnipeg, casting a bit broader of a net than a lot of people thought what was something that might just be a done deal.
Yeah, well, I think right now in the Leafs, we're just hearing, I think McLellan and Berube are the big ones. Maybe you thought, Craig Berube would be the favorite, but, Todd McLellan, I think he's had success, long time with San Jose. LA went to the playoffs the last couple of years, assistant with Detroit a while ago. So I think he's got a lot of experience, and I think, like coach in Edmonton as well. He's been in Canadian markets, so I think he could be a good fit. But Berube, where you know him from 2019 St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup run. But maybe there's some that wonder, hey, is Berube really had that track record of success, or did he just kind of catch lightning in a bottle with the song Gloria and the St. Louis Blues? We'll see. What happens. They're going to do some tweaking with the roster as well in Toronto, but I think those were the two names were the favorite there. And I think it was Dreger who mentioned, the Jets did have interest in Berube, kind of waiting where the chips fall. And I think New Jersey interested in all those, but also, Sheldon Keefe was one that they've requested permission to.
Yeah. With so many openings right now, and I can't remember a point in the last sort of 10 years where there were so many jobs open at the same time, with many candidates being interviewed and considered for a number of different jobs. I mean, this is the old game of musical chairs. How many new coaches will get hired this year? Because it certainly seems like a lot of teams are looking for more experienced coaches. And we'll talk with Rennie about what's the best fit for Winnipeg, with where they are right now as a club, with the roster makeup that exists right now coming out of last season, and the fact that they'd been a quality regular season team with 2 very good years and then fell so far short in the first round of the playoffs, and what that might mean for it. But Darren Dreger, if you want to get this one ready, I think we all know that Dregs is a pretty good line into the Winnipeg Jet front office. Dregs spoke earlier and talked about Winnipeg going through their process, and obviously mentioned the leading candidate for the job, Scott Arniel.
Winnipeg is going through their process, and I know that's an overused word in detailing all the teams that are still making those coaching decisions. I still feel and believe that Scott Arniel is a top candidate, a real strong chance of taking over for Rick Bowness in Winnipeg. Kevin Shoveldayoff, the GM, wants to make sure that he at least has conversation or goes through an interviewing process with Craig Berube and perhaps Sheldon Keefe. I'm sure internally in Winnipeg, they've had the conversations about how they approach the opportunity to make the change that they need to make. But again, I think the front runner is Scott Arniel. Depending on what happens with Craig Berube, Shoveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets at least want to go down that path and have a conversation before making the final call.
All right, so there's Dreger, and Dreger mentions Keefe as well. And again, I'm very intrigued about Sheldon Keefe. I mentioned that before he was even fired on the program. He's younger, but I think he's quite intense, and I think he's learned a lot of lessons along the way that is going to make him a much better head coach when he gets a second opportunity. You could say the same thing about Arniel. Like, listen, Arniel's head coaching experience is certainly, more removed, but, he's worked with some very, very excellent head coaches. And if we're talking about the inside track, Remis, I think of all of the parties, there's no one that would have a better read of the room of the Winnipeg Jets than a guy that's been the associate coach for the last few years. He'll know very much the personalities within the room. He'll know very well what has worked for the hockey club, and he had a front row seat for what didn't go well for the hockey club, both outwardly on the ice as well as behind the scenes. So it's not a surprise at all that Arniel is probably the favorite right now based on what we know. But as we said last week, this is important. This is one of these opportunities for the Winnipeg Jets, as much as it's also a challenge to find that right guy. But it is an opportunity to get more intel on your club, speak with more people from around the league. And as I said, like, I think you have to go into this, even if you've got a feeling of who that guy probably will be, to be open to new voices, new ideas, and, interview a number of candidates. I had not really thought of Berube, though, as potentially a Jets head coach. So that was an interesting name to hear mentioned by Kevin Cheveldayoff, by Darren Dreger when speaking about potential guys that the Winnipeg Jets are speaking to.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at, Coolbet put out these odds, as a part of it is generated from like where reports are, and there's not a lot coming out from the Jets, and Darren Dreger did mention Craig Berube, and I think he would be a good fit, knows the division. You probably know the team from playing with St. Louis. So I do agree though. Scott Arniel does seem like the front runner. You give him the associate coach title coming over from another organization. Seemingly, Rick Bowness getting up there in age. Maybe they thought this was the succession plan the whole time. But hey, there's a lot of jobs available. A lot of coaches have been fired. I mean, here are the vacancies right now: Toronto, Winnipeg, Seattle, New Jersey, LA, and San Jose. Maybe with so many names out there, they said, hey, you know what? Wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't at least take a look and see who else is out there.
Well, exactly. And I see, and who was it that just mentioned this in chat, speaking about Arniel, and said that, one thing on Arniel is that the penalty kill wasn't good last year. I mean, the penalty kill absolutely was an issue last year, special teams overall. But, Ken made a point. I mean, Scott Arniel's been here for 2 years. The previous year, the team was 7th in the league. And as I've asked people, like, what was the difference from the penalty kill last year to the previous season when they were top 10 in the league? And I mean, we're not going to get into a conversation where they really missed Saku Menelainen. The results weren't there, but I think if you look at the 2-year work of Scott Arniel with the penalty kill, it's better than just focusing in on last year. It doesn't change the fact that it wasn't good enough last season. That was a big reason why they weren't able to hang in there with the Avalanche. The power play of the Avalanche has been deadly. They've been effective against the Dallas Stars as well early on, although big win for Dallas to get up 2-1. We'll touch on those in a little bit. Listen, we'll do this on a Monday today, because I already see people in chat talking about this. Why not question of the day for Waverly, for not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray? In chat, one answer only. Who's your number one choice for Winnipeg Jet head coach of realistic names that, have been mentioned that are available right now? Let us know in the chat. And Reem, you mentioned the Coolbet gang now actually has odds on the next head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And Scott Arniel is a heavy favorite here at minus 250. And I would say that number probably makes a lot of sense considering what the general consensus has been for the last 2 years, that there was a succession plan in place. It does get complicated, though, when you've got some guys with pretty impressive resumes that are available that may be interested in taking a call in an interview from the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, and I don't know the calculations and how they come up with these. I'm sure just surveying reports. I mean, I posted this on the Winnipeg Sports Talk Instagram, and other people are saying, well, what about Gerard Gallant? People are asking about him. We haven't heard his name mentioned, so you can't really. It's not because you don't want to consider them, but you have to be able to put odds on, and we're hearing reports on Berube and McClellan, and the other ones, Jay Woodcroft, Todd Nelson on there, Ryan Warsofsky, and David Carl, who we mentioned all those last week in your conversation with Scott Billick. So, who else? People are commenting on Instagram. Where's Gallant? Bruce Boudreau. What about Boudreau? So there's a couple other names. There's a lot of good names out there. Greg Wyshynski, detailed like 30 different coaches or something in his article on ESPN. So we'll wait and see, but I would agree. Scott Arniel would be the favorite, and we'll wait and see what happens. It does sound like New Jersey and Toronto could be the first two dominoes to fall later this week, if you believe what some of the hockey insiders are saying.
Yeah, well, Matt Hyman has Brindamore there. Brindamore certainly has a job. I have a feeling if he is not, put it this way, I think the Jets would have a tough time convincing him to come to Winnipeg. I have a feeling there'd be a large check waiting for him in a place like Toronto. I certainly think the Seattle Kraken are waiting to see what happens with Rod Brindamore. That's a place that's been very, very quiet when it comes to their next head coach, and we all know the history that Rod Brindamore has with Ron Francis. I see a lot of Todd Nelson. I see Berube. I see Scott Arniel in the mix. I see Keefe. But Todd Nelson, there's a lot of respect for Todd Nelson as well in the mix, and he's at plus 850. Just for those of you that are listening on the podcast, here's what the odds are right now. And again, you can bet these at Coolbet if you want. Winnipeg Jets next head coach, Scott Arniel's minus 250. Todd McClelland is plus 350. Berube 8-1. Todd Nelson plus 850. Jay Woodcroft 9-1. That is not a name that I've actually heard linked to Winnipeg, but I'm sure that he's going to be getting some interest from around the league. Ryan Warsofsky, the young assistant, Sharks, 10-1, and then David Carl, who is the head coach at Denver. Not sure he's even looking to leave. But again, a big opportunity to coach in the National Hockey League. Maybe that's something that turns a guy around. So we'll talk more about this with Ren coming up in a few minutes when he joins us. And rewind, we're going to have to spend a little bit more time on this later on after Rennie and Jeff jump on.
Yeah.
But I have to just quickly say the Edmonton Oilers have themselves in a bit of a pickle. And what a way for that game to end last night. Not only do you get, and I'm not even going to say they got goalied because they were getting pushed to the perimeter. I mean, they were not getting anything really in the slot. High danger chances were basically even though the shot clock looked lopsided. But man, that cross-check to the face of Connor McDavid, you want to talk about adding insult to injury to a team that just lost on home ice? This series is getting pretty nasty, and the Canucks are the ones taking it there. The response from Edmonton, regardless of what happens with NHL player safety in game number 4, is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, we already saw Nikita Zadorov got fined $5,000. Carson Soucy has the in-person or phone. He's got a hearing, and they're going to come up with some discipline for that. McDavid, he's not going to get anything, Huss, for the slash that started the whole thing. And Edmonton, it's going rough for them. They got to ride their top guys. Not getting any depth scoring. They haven't got a save at all from their goaltending, which has totally sunk them after Skinner was solid during the year. And Vancouver, they play this good defensive system that Rick Tocchet was brought in, and they're getting scoring from throughout the lineup and playing solid defense. So if you had Tyler Myers playing big minutes for them, Soucy as well, Ian Cole, I mean, their defense has been solid, and it's kind of the blueprint that the Jets put up against the Oilers. Get really good goaltending. Play, McDavid rough. We saw Pionk do that in that series where the Jets swept Edmonton, maybe the closest sweep of all time. But yeah. Vancouver, they're playing a tough game. They're bringing it to Edmonton, and I think the goaltending, that's been the big difference. The Edmonton power play has been dominant, but again, Edmonton doesn't have secondary scoring. Their third pair defense, not good. And, goaltending, not good as well. So it's tough. I think they can certainly win. But everyone on both sides now, and it seems like in every series, talking about officiating and discipline. And I mean, on that play, McDavid slashes Soucy. Soucy gives him a shove. Zadorov comes in from behind with the cross check and knocks over McDavid. And I think because Soucy's going to just hit him in the chest again, McDavid's falling from his own guy and he gets him in the face. I don't think he meant to get him in the face. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great that it's McDavid. I don't
like that. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if, I wasn't trying to cross-check him that hard in the face, but my teammate cross-checked him in the back right into me. Like, I mean, that is, listen, this is, feel free in the chat. Let us know what you think the supplemental discipline will be. We'll revisit this later on. I'm sure Rennie's got a take or two on this.
I don't think it should be anything. Like, doesn't that happen all the time? Like, was McDavid injured? If he's not injured, no discipline. That's how it works with them. So I don't know why everyone's so up in arms. I think that happens after every play in the playoffs, and I think officiating, a lot of people in every series seem to have issues with it. It's been wildly inconsistent. So I don't think it should be anything for Susie. I'm fine with it.
He's too far down the lineup. It's too easy to suspend him, to make a point, to make a statement. Hey, you can't do that to star players in the league. But I am sort of with you. If that was Brett Kulak got it, or
exactly.
Warren Fogle, we're probably not in the same place. That being said, it was still dangerous. It was still a cross check to the face. But as we know, hey, again, spin the wheel with NHL player safety. You never know what you're going to get. Listen, we're going to talk about this with Sean Reynolds coming up in just a second. Hey, I do want to thank one of our newest sponsors, Rolly's Transfer, for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hey, gang, it is spring heading into summer, and we know that is a time that many of you will be making moves to new homes. And if you need the most respected and trusted movers' help, we direct you over to our friends at Rolly's Transfer at Rollys.com, Rollys. We've got an extensive logistics business, which means not just in Winnipeg, but throughout southern Manitoba. They've got regular and flexible routes, allowing the best prices on the most trusted moving services around. And we've got a great new function on their new website at Rollys.com to request a quote. You simply go in, let them know where you're going from, to how much stuff is moving on. They'll quickly turn it around and get back to you with a quote, and hopefully take most of the stress out of the move, which is always a stressful time. They've been family owned and operated for over 60 years. Manitoba's most trusted name in moving services is Rolly's Transfer. Find out more and request your quote today at Rollys.com. Our friends at Consolidated Supply are busy right now. The leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, and golf carts as the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba, with other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchen options. And of course, they're the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Pop by and see Consolidated Supply at their showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East. Tons of new lines coming in as well. Give them a follow on Instagram for the latest on that. And again, find out more on their website, online at cte.ca, or pop down and see them at 1395 Niagara Road East. Hey, for those golf carts, boats, machines, everything that you're going to be using this summer, you got to make sure that you have power for it. And that's where Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery come in. Now with 2 locations in Winnipeg, the second location open now, 452 Dovercourt Drive, the original on Logan Avenue. Listen, they've got literally batteries for everything. And the bottom line is you'll be able to shop local, get the best prices in town, beating the pants off the big box stores. And if you can make it into one of the 2 stores, they'll deliver it to you for free anywhere inside the perimeter with any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. Go to manitobabattery.com right now. Check out all of the great deals as the spring sale continues. You can give them a call or pop in. Order online at manitobabattery.com or pop in either of the 2 Manitoba Battery locations. And hey, big shaker tonight down at TCB. If listen, you're going to be seeing a lot of friends there. Maybe you have a quick stop into Modern Man Barbershop and get looking good for the event tonight. 8 locations in Winnipeg, so wherever you are in the city, there's one close to you, featuring great haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more. Easiest way to make an appointment and book your look is going online to modernmanbarber.com. Give them a follow on their Instagram page as well, over at Modern Man Barbershop. Let's welcome in Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet back to WST. Rennie, how are you? How was the weekend? Did you have extensive Mother's Day celebrations? Did you step up for the big day?
I hope I stepped up. I didn't see my mom out in Lactabani, but chatted with her. She wasn't available. I'm her personal slave every year. She's got a nice property out there, and so I go and take the chainsaw and cut down trees and do the grass and all these different kind of things. I think we're at the stage where, there's not much left that she needs. So gifts are mostly acts of service. Wasn't able to do that. So focused on the wife yesterday and tried to make it the best day I could for her. My daughters are getting to that age now where they're taking over, like they're able to, reflect how they feel about their mom, not just bring home, finger paintings and stuff like that from school. So did the best I could.
Ready? I listen. I think we're obviously going to get into where everything's at with the Jets coaching search and your thoughts on it all. But just before we do, Remis and I were just talking briefly about this Edmonton-Vancouver series. Let's start there. Thoughts on the Canucks' performance last night, being up 2-1 now in the series. What Edmonton has done and has not done. And obviously the incident at the end of game 3 that has, I can tell you, having just done a show in Edmonton for an hour, people in a nuclear mood, and that is not an exaggeration.
Yeah, and I was listening to you guys talk, and I agree with the idea that, if this wasn't Connor McDavid, it would be a very different situation. But you have to approach it like that, right? Because what you are trying to do if you're the Vancouver Canucks or any team with the other players or the other team's star player, when there's a whistle and there's a scrum, you're trying to find that one guy, right? Like if it's Tampa, you're going after Kucherov. It's Matthews if you're playing against Toronto. You're trying to find that guy and you're trying to dole out some punishment. So I get it. Like there's a little bit of a high stick right after the whistle is done. It's not Connor McDavid who starts it. That two-hand slash that he does is responding to the high stick that he got, that I think the player was kind of taking liberties. So McDavid does that. And I get it. It's a rough deal for Soucy that he ends up cross-checking him in the face because Zadorov hits him from behind. But I think it's a pretty bad excuse to say, yeah, but my own guy cross-checked him from behind. And then we shouldn't be punished because we both took a shot at this guy. Like this is the Vancouver Canucks trying to tenderize the star player of not just the Edmonton Oilers, but of the NHL. So I don't have a lot of empathy for Soucy in this situation just because he got his shot in on him. I think there will be supplemental discipline. I think it's probably warranted in this case. But to the series itself, I got to say, I take a look and I think that Edmonton has been very handily the better team in this series, but it's not showing up on the scoreboard necessarily, in the series count necessarily. But give credit to the Vancouver Canucks like they did in their series against the first round against the Nashville Predators. They're finding a way. And again, I hate that term because a lot of times that term is just a team winning games they shouldn't. But what the Vancouver Canucks do really well is they pounce and they capitalize on their scoring opportunities. They've done that all year, and that's what's made them really good in the games that I've covered them. During the times of the game where they're on top of their game, they get the puck into the back of the net. Now, the Edmonton Oilers are kind of like an avalanche that just rolls over you consistently over and over and over again, and they score on you that way. But what I'm seeing in this series is what the Edmonton Oilers do well. They're not quite doing as well as they've typically done for the rest of the season. And what the Vancouver Canucks do well at their peak, they've been doing that in the playoffs so far. And to me, it's their way of, they're finding a way to come out ahead in games that maybe the deserve to win a meter isn't in their position, but they're doing it in an honest fashion by getting the most out of what they get out of their game.
I think the Canucks are bullying the Edmonton Oilers right now. I mean, Rick Tocchet, and this will kind of segue into our conversations about potential coaches for the Winnipeg Jets. But when you look at what Tocchet's done this year, he took a team that was underachieving, I guess, to some, just not that good to others, and has rebuilt them into his mold of a tough, tenacious player and team. And they have they don't take a step back at all, Sean. They're realizing how these games are being called or not being called. And I think taking a real advantage of it. And I mean, whatever, player safety. Listen, we're going to talk about Carson Soucy getting a game or two. That's not doing anything to change this series.
No.
The opening draw, the first 5 minutes of game 4 in Edmonton, which is going to be an absolutely bloodthirsty crowd. I'm fascinated to see what happens. Like, do the Oilers come out and try and answer that right away? Does Evander start and go after some guy? Or do they just sort of let them play this out? I really do think that they as a team, because of the way Vancouver has handled them physically so far, need to step up and make some sort of a statement early on. And I do wonder whether that's going to be with amongst tough players, or they're going to try and do what Vancouver's been doing and maybe getting a little bit of an extra pound of flesh every single shift against some of the top players in Vancouver. What do you expect when they drop the puck in Game 4?
Well, I think that Edmonton has to be careful. I think if they go looking for their pound of flesh and trying to match that they're playing right into Vancouver's hands. Now, listen, I think you're right. I think you nailed it on one of the things that's making Vancouver successful. They're going in and they've got the ability. It starts with their defense that they rebuilt in the offseason. They put a bunch of trees on the back end because that's what's been winning teams championships for years now, for sure since 2019, back when St. Louis did it. They went and they built up a bunch of trees on the back end. They mete out punishment. But to your point, this team's got a really good finger on the pulse of what they can get away with, what they can't get away with in the playoffs. That reminds you of a team like the Florida Panthers that did that last year all the way to the Cup final. They're doing it all over again this year. They are a team that's built to play like that. To your point, Huss, every single whistle, right? It's not like we come out and we're going to try and settle the score and then we're going to get back to playing the kind of hockey we play. This is the kind of hockey they play, but they do it in a way where they don't go too far. They don't go outside themselves to chase that kind of game. And what that does is it allows them to try and lure the opposition into their style of game. Edmonton's not the smallest team anymore. They've got some tough guys on that. And hey, give Connor McDavid credit. He gets cross-checked from behind and then in the face. And he's up so fast that I actually thought it was a different player when I watched the replay. He pops up. He's a tough guy. He's been taking this abuse for years. They've got some really big guys on that team. They can play that style of game. I just think that the real key thing, and I think Game 3 is a real good advantage of that, Huss, Vancouver goes out and gets the lead, and then they really lean into that style of play, right? So they're winning the game on the scoreboard, and then they're able to go out and try to take the other team off their game. With both these teams, they've got really capable offense that win them games, and Edmonton has to make sure that they are enacting that game plan first before they go down the other road. I think that Edmonton is big enough and strong enough that they can carry out that style of play and make it a war in this series and not back down. And to your point, kind of get in the heads of the star players on the Vancouver Canucks. But they better make sure they're getting it done on the scoreboard first if they're going to go down that road. So I think if they come out in Game 4 and they try and answer the bell right away, they'd be playing right into the Vancouver Canucks' hands.
Hey, just before we get to Jets coaching, one thing I've noticed, and maybe it's even more in our faces because of what an impact player Zadorov has been in this series, but for all of our talk about the trade deadline and what the Jets ended up doing, getting Toffoli and getting Sean Monahan,
I know where you're
and
going
then
with
really
this.
Seeing where the blue line was against Colorado as a major weakness that, ended up being a real big part of that series. How the hell did Zadorov get picked up for a third and a fifth? And in retrospect, if you went back and thought of what the Jets put out for the players that they got, knowing that, what did Tanev go for? A second and a third or second and a fourth?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, those are the acquisitions that have been the most impactful right now. And it's just crazy that the prices for defense were as low as they were for those particular players going, considering how much interest there was and the lack of significant players like that moving. Still can't believe what Vancouver got Zadorov from a division rival in Calgary early on this season.
Well, Huss, the one thing that a player like Zadorov and Tyler Myers, let's say, have in common right now, other than the fact that they're impact players in the playoffs, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, is it good to have guys like this during this playoff run? There are two players that, a lot of the analytical crowd in the NHL scoff at and kind of make fun of, and, oh man, you're going to go get this guy. How does this guy still have a job? I don't know how often I've seen those arguments when it comes to those players. And hey, there was a lot of Jets fans who scoffed at Tyler Myers going and getting paid what he got paid in Vancouver when he left. I remember at the time when, I had Sportsnet Radio call me, and I was asked what they should expect there in Vancouver when it came to Tyler Myers. And I said, look, there's going to be a lot of nights where he drives you crazy. There's going to be a lot of nights where people say you're overpaying and all these different kind of things. But when it comes to the playoffs, and if you take a look at how he was with the Jets in 2018, big, strong, mean guy. He's got a long stick that he can use to shut down passing lanes, those kind of things. These guys may, look exposed at various times throughout the regular season. But it's all these kind of guys that, Shea Weber in that run that the Montreal Canadiens went on. People had remember people scoffed at the idea that the Canadiens moved PK Subban for him. And then in that time, he's one of the best defensemen you can imagine going down the stretch. Joel Edmondson gets picked up by Montreal in that case. And he's just another one of these big giant trees that people say are deficient defensemen. And then they get into the playoffs and they are absolute beasts. That's what we're seeing out of these guys here. So maybe they get picked up, on the cheap, because there's a feeling out there within the analytical community that these guys are deficient players. But come this time of year, they absolutely are not deficient players. And I think you nailed it. Those are the kind of players I think when Kevin Cheveldayoff was going out and making his moves at the trade deadline, that's kind of what you were expecting the Jets to go after. Now, maybe the Jets weren't as willing to part with players that would be UFAs at the end of the season and losing them for nothing. Maybe they were trying to find someone who would be a long-term solution. But a player like that would have gone a long way for the Winnipeg Jets, because you could see in their series against Colorado, it just got far too easy for a guy like Val Nichushkin to get to the front of the Jets net. There was no punishment being doled out for him getting there, and it cost the Jets in the end.
We'll certainly, over the course of these next couple months heading in and post-draft, spend a lot of time talking about the way this Jet blue line is shaping up for next year, because anyone that watched that series know that there were some players that were struggling, that were probably playing too high in the lineup. And, you got some other options as well with some younger players coming in and big questions about Brendan Dillon and Dylan DeMello. But the biggest question, Ren, right now is who is going to be the next coach of the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, Scott Arniel is a leading candidate right now. I'll put it to you this way. How likely do you think it is that Arniel is the guy? And what is your thoughts on that as the Jets do talk to some other candidates that are potentially available?
I think he's the guy. And I do think as well, that's the tricky part about this. If you're Scott Arniel, you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, if I'm the guy and I think I've shown you what I can do, and why don't we just get this done? And some teams, I think, would maybe go down that road. I think the Winnipeg Jets learned far too much from their coaching search a couple of years ago to know that this is an opportunity when you've got a head coaching vacancy, even if they are fully and 100% committed going to Scott Arniel. The opportunity to talk to other coaches is something you should not pass up as an organization. And I think, Scott Arniel probably understands that. But I go back to this story. We talked with John Tortorella. I did a story on Hockey Night in Canada the first year that the Philadelphia Flyers came rolling through. He was really open about the idea that he'd met with Kevin Cheveldayoff. They'd met at John Tortorella's house. Chevy went there in the morning. They had brunch. He stayed there for 6 hours. They had lunch later on in the day. They had two separate meals. They'd never met each other before that. And Tortorella walked away from that and said, I wasn't going down the road of being the Winnipeg Jets head coach, but I feel like I walked away from that with a lifelong hockey relationship that I expect to continue going forward. But beyond that, this is an opportunity to take all the brightest hockey minds out there who are auditioning for that job, and they're saying to Kevin Cheveldayoff, listen, this is what I think is wrong with your team. This is how we exploit your team when we play against them. This is the word on your team around the league. And this is how I think that we can fix that. It's free consultation from the brightest minds in the hockey world when you go and talk to all these different coaches here. The Winnipeg Jets would be crazy not to take the free consultation from everybody else. So even if they are going down the road of Scott Arniel, this is an opportunity where the hockey world is going to walk in and tell you all the things they think that could make the Winnipeg Jets a better team. I think you have to listen in on that if you're the Jets. And I think, being the Jets, and we've said this before, I'm not going to be one of these guys who says good players and good coaches won't come to Winnipeg, but you have to know that there's other brighter shining markets that may draw a lot of these other coaches away. So you have to take every advantage you have when you're in Winnipeg. And it is an advantage to listen in to all the different coaches out there telling you what they think could fix your team. It's free advice. You got to take it.
So listen, I mean, obviously we know lots about Scott Arniel. Who of the other guys on the market intrigue you? And even before that, what do you think the Jets should be looking for in their next head coach? Like, what are the qualities or the thing that can help the Jets build off of two really strong seasons in the right direction, but very disappointing playoffs?
So when I take a look, I think that like right now, one of the top coaches, and this is whatever, probably just easy to say it, but I think Jared Bednar has really, really kind of struck the mold as the new age NHL head coach. Like, he's really, really good at connecting with his players. There could be a lot of egos on that team, right? Like Cale Makar, not saying that these are players with egos, but Cale Makar is on his way to being maybe the second greatest defenseman of all time. The numbers that he's putting up, there's considerations that come with star players like that. And up and down the lineup, you've got stars that you need to contend with. Jared Bednar does a really, really good job of handling those personalities. I think we all remember McKinnon yelling at him on the bench, right? And seeing him handle that situation. A lot of people at that time were thinking that's the end of Bednar, and it doesn't happen that way. He continues to reach those players, and I think that he does because he handles them well. He does a really good job of making everything black and white. This is what you need to do to succeed. When we do this, we win. When we don't, we lose. It's up to you. Do those things and we're going to win. Don't do them, we're going to lose. There's no brinksmanship with him. There's just a real, like, this is the process. If we buy into the process, it's going to work. If we don't, it's not. And it's really worked there. So he does a good job of holding players accountable by going into the media and saying, this is the plan. If we follow this plan, we'll win. If we don't, we won't. He doesn't go out and say, this player's not following the plan, or this player isn't doing this and doing that. I think the Jets are a team, clearly, all the conversation that we've heard over the last 2 years is they needed their culture corrected. It's basically a common theme in the organization now. People don't dispute it. The Winnipeg Jets culture needed to be turned around. Rick Bowness came in and is the kind of guy who very bluntly points a finger in someone's chest and says, let's get through and do this. I think the Jets really bristled over that the last couple of years. We saw it at the end of the year last year. I think we saw it at points throughout the year this year. The Jets came from a coach that never introduced a negative, never talked negatively about them in the media. And because of that, I think they have a hard time when that happens. So I think what they're looking for is a coach who is definitely holds you accountable, but does so in maybe a soft, indirect way. So a guy like Todd McClellan is a guy who stands out to me if we're going down that road. And by the way, Scott Arniel, I think, is one of these kind of guys, but I think that's the kind of coach you're looking for, the kind of coach who's going to be able to make sure that he holds his players accountable, but may not do so in such a direct way, because I do think that the clashes that existed in between Rick Bowness and the Winnipeg Jets had the ability to kind of take away from their game overall. They need to find someone who is keeping them accountable, because they strike me as a team that's needed to be kept accountable for a long time, but maybe do so in a way that's a little less brinksmanship.
Rennie, at the end of the playoffs, we heard a number of players on the Winnipeg Jets mention that, their level of intensity didn't seem to match what the Avalanche were bringing. I feel the same way watching this Edmonton-Vancouver series at times. Like, the Vancouver Canucks are playing with a level of intensity where every shift feels like it's third period of Game 7 of the Cup final, and Edmonton is not that way. And like Rick Tocchet's done a lot of great things this year in building that club into really the mold of himself. I think of, certainly what Rod Brindamore's done over the years in kind of creating a relentless team that in a lot of ways is the epitome of what he did when he was, playing his long career in the National Hockey League. And I'm not sure it is one of those guys that's yelling all the time and super focused, but I do think there is something to be said about whoever it is that takes over this club needing to inject a little bit more of that. I mean, X's and O's are one thing, and you'll have systems. I mean, all those things, different guys will have different ideas on this. But like when we're looking at the playoffs right now, often it does come down to who seemingly wants it more, who's willing to fight for it more. And this goes down to just simple things like puck battles that kind of expand over the course of a game. What do you think about that as far as for the Winnipeg Jets? As far as turning that identity into a team that is not, okay, we're skilled, we're really committed to doing what we're doing defensively, and a team that, it's doing a lot of what Vancouver does right now in their level of intensity and fight. I think about that a lot right now just because of what we heard the Jets say at the end of the season.
Well, here's my deal on that. If you take a look at the Winnipeg Jets for a good chunk of the season, I think they were the NHL standard for that. Like if you think about when teams would come in here and you think about that game they played against Boston right before Christmas time and the couple games they played against the Colorado Avalanche before that, and that stretch of hockey, 33 games where they're allowing 3 goals or less, they pull that off, not by fluke. It's because they go out and they replicate their game night after night, and Adam Lowry's line goes out and consistently looks like the best line on the ice and absolutely grinds the heck out of the opposition. And then they hop off the ice, sometimes with Nino Niederreiter ragging the puck in the corner, and then they change, and Mark Scheifele gets on with his line, and then they continue on, and all of a sudden it's one of those shifts where you've had the opposition bottled up in their end and haven't touched the puck for 2.5 minutes, and that's what that looks like. That was like that ultimate compete level that the Winnipeg Jets had. But to your point, Huss, we haven't seen that from them in the playoffs. So for me, I thought the most interesting thing said by any of the Winnipeg Jets players before going into this series was Mark Scheifele talking about riding the highs and the lows, the roller coaster of the playoffs, and what he'd learned heading into this year. And his was basically handling that better, because I don't think the Winnipeg Jets as an organization have done a good job of that over the years, right? Like they're absolutely rolling in the playoffs in 2018, and then Vegas kind of challenges them, and then they had a hard time getting there after that. The year after that, they had a hard time throughout the season and kind of fell off. I mean, I still remember Game 6 against the St. Louis Blues in the 2019 where they're eliminated is an all-time organizational no-show for me, like elimination game, and you just do not show up, right? And then you knock off the Edmonton Oilers and you go against the Montreal Canadiens and they challenge you, and then all of a sudden, well, regardless, I know there's all these people out there who always want to blame that on Mark Scheifele being taken out, and that was the problem. Well, okay, you ran into a little bit of adversity with losing Mark Scheifele. What's your response? I don't want to hear excuses. I want to hear solutions. And so time and time again, that's what we've seen from this organization. And it happened last year against the Golden Knights, and then it happens again this year. I don't think that the Winnipeg Jets don't have the intensity. I don't know that they've found a way to manage the big moments and be able to be who they can be at their best in the big moments. Give it to the Vancouver Canucks. There's been a lot of times this year they've looked like a very flawed team, even on their way to being one of the top teams in the West or one of the top teams in the NHL. But their coach was always kind of talking about when they fell, very calmly getting them back up to that and being that team. They're being it right now, and they were that in the last round. They've found a way to be the best version of themselves. I don't think the Winnipeg Jets lack that intensity or that ability to play to that level. They lack the ability to handle the emotions of the playoffs in a way that they can bring that style of game at the most crucial time of the year.
And I just wonder what a coach how big a part of that is the job of the next coach to try to bring that out of this club. Or maybe it's on the general manager to get a few more players that are in that mold that can maybe help create more of that in the team. Because you're right, they were able to do it for a pretty extended period of time at a point in the season where most of the other teams aren't locked in like this. But over the years, Sean, and you did a pretty good job of mentioning some very ugly nights where the team bowed out of the playoffs. But even overall in this series, knowing the challenges that they had, that was something that impressed me so much about Colorado, was just how locked in they were each and every shift. And you want to talk about a relentless style of play. They did sort of change the way they played a lot during the regular season, knowing what they had to do to, kind of exhibit their will and take advantage of everything that they had over the Jets.
I mean, I guess the answer with a team like the Colorado Avalanche is they didn't for a number of years, and they bowed out and they underachieved, and they learned from that. That's the one thing that I've thought is maybe a little tiresome, Huss, when it comes to this Winnipeg Jets conversation about Jared Bednar introduced the term scar tissue into the series, right? Learning from that scar tissue. And that team did that. And it took them to that's 2 years ago. The Colorado Avalanche have basically been on the rise around the same amount of time as the Winnipeg Jets. Why have the Colorado Avalanche learned from their scar tissue and the Winnipeg Jets haven't? I mean, that's a big question. And I will say this, there's something to be said, and I don't have the answer. If I did, the Jets probably would have hired me a little while ago, and I would be doing a lot different work than I'm doing right now. But Rick Bowness struck me as a guy last year who was kind of blown away by how his team responded in the playoffs, and he struck me as a guy this year that seemed to be a guy who was out of answers. So could another coach have come in and found a way, or saw what was wrong with the Winnipeg Jets and figured out a way to get the best out of them at the most crucial time of the year? I guess so. You're starting to look, though, at like it's 3 coaches now that have gone through here. One of them went to the Cup final last year, and one of them looks like he's challenging to do that again. He couldn't get that out of this Winnipeg Jets team. And this last coach took the Dallas Stars to the Cup final not too long ago, and he seemed baffled by what's happening here. So I don't know. Sometimes you want to say, hey, the easiest thing to say is it's the coach. Get rid of the coach, put in a new coach. Everything will be fine. They'll teach these guys how to get there. To me, the coaching changes over the years and the lack of success and the frustration that I think we've seen boiling below the surface with Paul Maurice before he left and with Rick Bowness as he left tells me that that's a very hard problem to solve, and it may be a little bit more about personnel within the dressing room than it is about simply having a coach that presses the right button on his players.
Sean Reynolds is with us from Sportsnet, and of course, Kenny and Rennie fame, and the big extravaganza is tonight. Will you be wearing the headband and just tee people up on the star-studded event you and Kenneth Weeb have planned?
Oh, my daughters are going to be taking tickets. I think they wanted to reserve the headbands for themselves, but we'll see. I'll see if there's a way.
All Reynolds, mandatory dress code.
Yeah,
all Reynolds must be wearing headbands.
You'll know it's a Reynolds if they're walking around with the headband. That'll be the way that you know. But no, it's going to be a great event. Love that you're going to be there, Huss. Love that your next guest, Hammy's going to be there on top of, basically the vast majority of the sports media in the city is going to be there, and just a whole whack of WST fans and KNR fans and Illegal Curve fans, because we know we have a lot of crossover. It's another sold out event for us. We are absolutely blown away by the support that we get from the podcast viewing community here in Winnipeg. We are spoiled in this city. Tonight's an example of that. The whole point of the event is to try and spoil people back. Absolutely great deal, we think, for the folks coming down there to try the amazing food at TCB and get one of their drinks for $20. We think you're making money when you come down there. Hopefully that's the experience everybody has. But yeah, packed house, sold out room. It's going to be great. Can't wait for it tonight.
Everyone's fired up. We'll see you guys tonight. Rennie, thanks for doing this, and don't have a big lunch. Save it up, because that pizza is 5-star. We're going to look to hammer some of that tonight. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Anytime, my man. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Coming up in just a minute, Jeff Hamilton. But hey, quick cheers to a big week coming up on WST from our friends at Little Brown Jug.
We're not just for the showboats or the champions. We're here for the good ones, the ones who work hard and show up for others not to get recognized, but because it's the right thing to do. We'd like to think that our good intentions show up in our beer. We keep working to perfect it, not because we want fame or fanfare, but because you deserve it. 1919, the good you deserve.
All right, good stuff with Red. Hammer's coming up right away. And, of course, Hammer was spending the weekend down at Princess Auto Stadium as Blue Bomber training camp is officially underway. You don't believe the preseason begins next week. We've got a May preseason game at Princess Auto Stadium and then right into Bomber season. So we'll talk about that with Jeff Hamilton as well as a number of stories in and around the Canadian Football League. Of course, Princess Auto Stadium, now proud home of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And don't forget, Princess Auto Stadium is hosting the Canada Day extravaganza, programming for the entire family all day long, completely free, highlighted by a big concert, including a number of performers, headlined by the Sam Roberts Band, as well as Doc Walker. It should be an awesome day. Plan to spend Canada Day down at Princess Auto Stadium. And of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of WST and the Bombers, Jets, Goldeyes, founded and headquartered right here in Winnipeg. 2 locations to pop by and see them, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365. Today is also a great day. If you're hungry and you're not going to be at TCB scarfing down all that pizza, to enjoy Hoagie Boys. If you have not been to one of the most eclectic and amazing sandwich shops in town, you need to get down to it. They are on Osborne, on the South Osborne area, with some of the most wild sandwiches you have ever tried. A big personal favorite of the Gary Ghostman and the Bronco Buster. But go to Hoagie Boys online. That's with a Z, and check them out. And of course, that is from the brains of the fellas at Cosmos Food Cantina. They are also doing the food at the Beer Can, which is unbelievable. I had the Golden Gal, which is their burger on the weekend. If you're at the Beer Can, definitely check that out, as well as serving up all the amazing food over at Next Door at 116 Sherbrooke. Shout out to Hoagie Boys, and pop by, tell them that the boys at WST sent you. They're open daily from noon until 7 o'clock. Our friends at Wallace & Wallace are busy right now. You know what's going on. It is time to get to work. And when you're thinking work, whether it be fencing or overhead doors, Wallace & Wallace is the place to do it. They're the fencing and overhead door specialists since 1946. If you and your property need the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter did a number on your old one, give them a call. They've got vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, wood fences. They've got the right one for you. And hey, if it's time to replace your garage door, they've also got Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors, one perfect for your home. You can give Wallace & Wallace a call, 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. Also find out more online at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. And now we won't be in formal attire tonight for K&R's party. If you are looking to up your menswear game heading into spring and summer, you need to get on down to F Apparel, gang. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. Having a wedding or in a wedding party, make sure to talk to the guys at F about a 15% discount when the wedding party gets their suits at F Apparel. They've also got a great promo on right now for graduating high school seniors needing a suit for their big day. F Apparel's at 190 Smith Street. You can make an appointment and find out more online at F. That's EPHapparel.com. All right, it's Monday. That means it's hammer time, and we've got a whole lot to talk about as the CFL is underway across the country. Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press joins us now. Hammer, what is up? It's great to have you back on the program. I hope you had a good weekend.
Us, always a pleasure being back. Great weekend. Got a chance to take in the Northern Lights, if you will. I say if you will because, after heading down to Birds Hill after midnight on Friday and snapping some photos, it was very clear I needed to turn my night vision on so that I could actually see the Northern Lights. And so and what I'm trying to say is that if you took them with your regular phone, you couldn't see them. You couldn't really see them in person. So I have this lingering feeling, wondering just how many people out there saw what we see, or if it's just the technology of their cameras that's allowing those Northern Lights to come.
It's funny you say that because
I was pretty bored on the weekend. Obviously.
I had no idea that this was happening. And as I often do on the weekend, I posted up with some buddies at a local spot and watched hockey for like 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And as I flipped my, turned in between periods, check phone, what's going on, the entire feed, literally the entire feed, was people that had sort of jetted outside the city and were seeing like some of the most incredible Northern Lights I've ever seen. Mm. And I'm like, well, can we see them this year? Did we know this is happening? Is it happening again tomorrow? I actually just want to thank everyone that did take those photos to, for those of us that were either indoors or not somewhere we could see it. But it's pretty spectacular. And apparently it was all over the world. Like, were people that are into this, was this expected, or did this just sort of happen on Friday night?
So I actually got a message, letting me know about it. I had no idea about it and whether or not I was interested in going to check it out. Like I said, I mean, I can just speak through my experience, and it was, me amongst what was certainly hundreds, if not thousands of people, making their way into Birds Hill. Like it was bumper to bumper after midnight. I've never seen it that busy, even on the weekends when you head out, to have the beach crew. And by the time I got in there, I mean, there is lots of car lights, so that kind of disrupts it a little bit. So then you kind of go deeper into pass where it's darker. And, like I said, my experience was kind of like you could see a little bit of blue, you could see a little bit of green, but it was nowhere, reflective of what the photos I took using my app or using my night camera, and certainly not even close to being comparable to the experience I had back in 2015 when I was fortunate enough to travel with the Grey Cup up into northern Manitoba communities, including Churchill, and found myself unable to sleep at 2 a.m. And we had a pretty great setup in that we had our own kind of, I had my own double occupancy in this train, and we had our own, there was about 10 of us, and we had access to about 13 different carts, one of which was an observation desk at the very end. So at this 2 a.m, I went, just kind of walked around, went up into this observation desk, and for 2 hours, I just stared up into the sky at some of the most breathtaking colors you can imagine. So, when I put that one side by side with my experience at Birds Hill Park on Friday, I left feeling like I never saw any Northern Lights. But to answer your question, it was like this geo something storm. Don't quote me on this. It's this storm of some sense that, had created this, I don't know if it was once in a lifetime, but certainly very rare opportunity. And I think it was definitely better in Western Canada. I might be wrong on that, but I believe that is the case. But I did see pictures from all over the country, and to your point, all over the world
too. Yeah. And I'm no surprise. I'm just getting buried in the chat here now. It was known as
dummy,
anticipated. Us doesn't read the news.
This is trade Shifley all over again.
Sports only all the time.
We've been talking about this for years, and I'm guilty by association.
Most of us heard about it early on Friday when the sunspot was detected. Anyways, that was a neat part of it. Well, there was all sorts of things that were happening environmentally. You had the Northern Lights. You also had a whole lot of smoke, which sort of impacted the start of Blue Bomber Camp. Fill us in on the weekend from a Bomber perspective, Hammer.
Yeah, so that was interesting. And, this is going to be something that will be top of mind for the Players Association and might end up being a thorn in the side of the CFL. Now, it's hard, it's kind of lame to describe it as a thorn in the side when you're talking about, air quality and health conditions here. But this was obviously something with all the wildfires last year playing such an issue and wreaking such havoc on, obviously not just CFL games, but our air quality pretty much all summer. And with the anticipation that this year, is going to be even worse for those, to have something like this occur in May, when it's kind of, when it's certainly still wet season, is alarming. And, I was able to talk with Jake Thomas yesterday. He's one of the player reps for the PA on the Bombers. And, he's that guy who's annoying the front office, saying, look at these meter readings. We can't be, this is against the rules, and we'll be hammering the team. And I mean, he definitely gave the Bombers a lot of credit for being an organization that, rolls with the punches and isn't going to fight back. But he's that guy who's reminding, the team and his teammates that, the air quality needs to be, at a certain level for the players to get on the field. It ended up yesterday, the result being, a 6-hour delay. There were conversations about moving it into the Subway soccer complex there by the other field, just when you get into Chancellor Matheson on the left, of course. And, that ended up not happening. It certainly, I could smell it in the morning. It was pretty staunch, throughout the day. I think it settled more when the wind, as the wind picked up later in the day, and they were able to practice outside. But it was, again, just an early reminder of what's to come here. But ultimately, good, solid day, first day of camp. You should, there's definitely, like every year, there's that excitement. Players are all back. They're hitting the field. This year has a much different feel, compared to last season, even though there are some.
How so?
Some very well, just, I was going to say, even the similarities are there, right? They lost the Grey Cup again. They lost the Grey Cup by, in dramatic fashion again. But where it differs this year is the competition. Last year we were talking about, who was going to be the third string quarterback. And I believe the other spot was an opening at punter. This year there's holes up and down the lineup on both sides of the ball in all three phases. From particularly in the trenches, there's 2 open spots on the offensive line, and there's 2 open spots on the defensive line, and that doesn't take into consideration a receiver spot that's available, a DB spot that's available. Janarian Grant isn't back, so they're auditioning return men. In these cases, any speedy DB or receiver has return duties on their resume, but as we've seen in the past, it doesn't really matter what you were able to do in college. It's you got to find that guy can be a game breaker. And when Grant was out of the lineup last year, the Bombers special team struggled a lot with field position. So that's an important part. That's the different feel here. But it brings an excitement. The fact that they have a ton of guys in camp, there's a ton of competition, and I think it ups the level, not just for those guys that are trying to secure a spot, but for some of the veterans that might be a little too comfortable after all this time. Their jobs might be up. So it just feels different in that way. And a lot of guys spoke to that yesterday.
It's almost been a running gag whenever we've been talking about the Timberwolves. I keep on calling Anthony Edwards Anthony Bennett over and over again. And of course, Bennett was that guy that got picked first overall, the Canadian guy by the Cavs that ended up doing literally nothing in the NBA. I guess we can make that similar comparison to another Anthony Bennett, who was picked in the first round by the Bombers last year and was released after rookie camp. But was that one of the bigger surprises of the weekend?
You know what? I don't know if, surprises, certainly. Obviously you hear that, the guy you take in the first round of your draft pick the previous year, to have him be released, obviously it's going to come as a surprise. But ultimately what happened here in this case is he's hurt. He didn't pass his physical. So that leads, there's only X amount of spots remaining. Anthony Bennett isn't gone. It's not like he got released, was handed a plane ticket and says, see you later, come back next season if you're healthy. He's still much around the team, and there'll be a plan put in place on getting him, back to health and ultimately deciding from there. But, listening to Mike O'Shea speak yesterday, he liked his first season. He dressed for all 18 games. I think he had 8 tackles. He's a guy that was definitely spot duty, and I think that was the expectation for him. That's, not a lot of guys, Canadian defensive ends come in their first season and are starring. no matter where you're taken in the draft. But I think he took the steps that the Bombers expected him to take, and this would be, I would describe it as a hiccup early in his career. And while it looks damning that he's been quote unquote released, they haven't released the grip from him, and the expectation is he'll once he gets back to full health, he'll be back with the club.
Hammer, the Strevolution's back. How did Streveler look? And do you have any feeling right now as to how he might be used this year outside of being on the bench and waiting to see when Zach Collaros comes out of a game?
Yeah, it's a great question, Huss, and it's one I was asking the boys yesterday. I don't think anyone spoke to him, and I was doing more of that exact story that I was, or the story I did is pretty much what I was just talking about, is the fact that there's open competition, and I wanted to hear from some of the long-term veterans and what they thought of the vibe this season. So I didn't get a chance to talk to Chris Streveler, but the question I posed to my colleagues was, I want to ask Chris if he's the same guy he was, in Winnipeg. And obviously with years in the NFL, he's improved his game. I imagine, he certainly has improved his throwing abilities. But what I mean by that question is not, are you this wide-eyed college guy? Because as we all know, he came straight from college, and got a chance to start those first 3 games after Matt Nichols went down. That's not what I'm, it's not like I'm expecting him to be that guy. I'm wondering if he's willing to play the exact same role. And of course, anyone who got a chance to watch him in his time in Winnipeg was that he was pretty much a linebacker / running back who, on occasion threw the ball, and threw the ball more often when he had to. But when you have your number one in, what is his role? He's beyond short yardage because, and nothing against Dakota Prukop, because Dakota Prukop's an absolutely terrific number 3. But whereas Dakota would use his speed and athleticism to kind of find that edge and did it very well and shoot up, a lot of yards, Chris Streveler can do that. But I think he prefers going through you than around you. And I think that's really what I'm getting at is he going to be willing to put it all on the line every game? And just judging by his attitude and his personality and his age and all those things, it sounds like he is. Because, obviously this team has Brady Oliveira, obviously leading the running responsibilities and running duties. But I have a hard time thinking just to preserve him, or if or to exploit other teams, to bring in a Chris Streveler as some kind of running option, punishing option, and then leave him out for a couple plays afterwards like they had done in the past. If that wouldn't be something that Buck Pierce would be all over, I'd have a hard time thinking it wouldn't be. So I am very much intrigued to see what his role is. But, Chris Streveler is this, a lot of ways the same guy, certain as he was in Winnipeg, certainly has years of experience and some great, learning learning situations where he was in the NFL and learning from great QBs and being it with some great programs. But when you boil down to it, this is a guy who's willing to put his head down and truck anybody in front of him. And I think that's going to be a little bit of the expectation here. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And I'm excited to talk to Chris in the coming days to see if he feels the same way.
Well, for sure. And it's important to note that since Chris was in the Canadian Football League, the rules have changed.
Yeah, you can have 2 quarterbacks.
You can have 2 quarterbacks. And that to me is the most interesting thing to see, if and when we will see Streveler and Collaros in the same backfield at the same time.
Well, we've also seen the Bombers. Now, it's obviously a lot more hidden when it was Darvin Adams in the past, where they'd toss it to him and then he'd throw the ball. But you have another quarterback that if you were to lateral backwards pass, he could throw it upfield, and, why wouldn't they exploit that? But to your, I think what you were alluding to, Huss, is, it's very difficult to take down Chris Streveler, like to the point where I don't think you have to hide what you're doing. And I'd be fascinated, I'm not sure this would be the formation, but it would certainly be incredible to see. But if you had Zach Collaros behind center and you had Brady to one side and you had Chris Streveler to the other, and you just decided to exploit whichever side you wanted to go or take turns with guys trucking, I have a hard time thinking that Chris Streveler couldn't get 5 yards a carry minimum, especially with the skill of the offensive line. And so what's the interest in exploiting that by offensive coordinator Buck Pierce? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but that's certainly a tool in the tool belt that hasn't been around for since Streveler left.
Hammer, you've been all over this since it first broke, but it seemed to really come to a head last week. The Chad Kelly situation in Toronto. He was suspended for a minimum of 9 games, has to go through some counseling and some other things that he has to do before he'll be reinstated. And yet there he was on the field, which caused quite a bit of outrage, including some very pointed public comments from significant influential women in the Canadian Football League office, as well as other team offices like Ryan Marcoux here in Winnipeg. Take us, I know you were all over this last week. How much heat is the league feeling right now? How much is this on the Toronto Argonauts? And now that Kelly is not participating with the Argos, where do they go from here? Because I'm not sure that he ever plays another down in the Canadian Football League, to be honest. And I don't have a lot of confidence considering his knucklehead ways of his almost entire life that he is going to be able to maybe meet the standards that have been put forth for to return to the league from Randy Ambrosie.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time thinking the league isn't feeling the pinch of the public pressure or the public fallout from their decision making. I think their punishment ultimately was trying to balance public outrage, because if you give him, say, 3 or 4 games, something that a Garrett Marino got for injuring Jeremiah Masoli, and that of course was separated into 3 separate incidents. I think people would get extremely pissed off. I think people are upset with the 9 games. So I think the league was trying to strike a balance there. But the punishment also is in line with the policy. And I think this is the gender-based violence policy of the CFL. And I think this is the very interesting part about this. And I wrote about this policy shortly after Jeffrey Orridge brought it into play. But before and after his release or his exit from the CFL, and then Randy Ambrosie came on, and of course Johnny Manziel was welcomed into the league. Well, the gender-based violence policy isn't just in place to deal with an incident that occurs, during the season or off season to a player that's in the CFL already. It's also in place to utilize with players who might have questionable past of welcoming them into the community, right? Into a football community, a CFL community. And so I'm convinced, and I've said this on your show before and others, that I don't think Randy Ambrosie had a damn clue what the gender-based violence policy was until he was forced to use it in this occurrence. And I say that because he didn't exercise it for the Johnny Manziel vetting, and we all saw how that ended up. There's Jerome Messam, who was cut right away. A couple other guys that have dealt with criminal stuff that weren't, had been charged but weren't convicted. And immediately the Randy Ambrosie comes in and says this player's been, the team says he's been released, and then Randy Ambrosie follows it up with a league email saying, they won't sign off on any future contracts for this player. And I mean, there's a lot of people out there that go, that's exactly the kind of justice I want, F around, find out kind of situation, right? However, the gender-based violence policy with the Canadian Football League takes a much different approach, and it's built and designed by industry experts. And I think that's one of the unique things about it, is a lot of these policies, don't take into consideration what the people, the opinions of the people who have dedicated their professional lives to this. And so, the point of the policy through these experts' opinions is not to just cut this guy loose, because what you're doing is you're immediately removing his income. You're sending him back into his own community, probably pissed off, jaded, and who knows how he'll handle that kind of treatment and what that will result in. And most importantly, has not learned his lesson, and therefore will have no hope of, improving in the future. And so what this whole policy is about is not to just, have a zero tolerance policy. It's to bring, in this case, Chad Kelly, bring him in, try to counsel him, offer him the supports that he needs to then understand the situation that he's in. Now, this isn't a coddling process where it's all about the perpetrator. The focus is also on the victim, of course. It's to interview the victim, to talk to them, how they feel. There's a process in there as well. Now, the victim obviously isn't forced to talk to anybody, but the point is the goal here is to rehabilitate and to educate the perpetrator, while the perpetrator's responsibility is to take ownership for their actions and to prove to these experts they actually have learned their lesson. It's not like you show up in September and go, yep, I totally understand. That was my bad. I served my 9-game suspension. Let's go. There is an ongoing process throughout this. And to your point, Huss, and why I tend to agree with you that Chad Kelly is never going to throw another ball in this league is because he has to admit what he did was wrong. He has to be mindful of his actions moving forward here. So when he went on Instagram and did this drunken, ridiculous, live thing shortly after being in the midst of this civil suit, that's going to be used against him. Appealing this suspension, saying, I don't think this suspension is stiff enough, is going to be used against him by these experts because it's showing that he's minimizing his actions. And so it's a very complex, sophisticated in some depths policy, but it's aimed at trying to serve all parties with the ultimate goal of whether it's the victim being felt like he or she is heard and is is given those supports, as well as the perpetrator understanding the actions that he had are inappropriate and to learn from his mistakes so that when he goes back into whichever community, whether that's, and there's no guarantee that even if you have that, make that progress, that you'll be invited back to the league. But it's important that if you at least gain that education so that the next community you go to, you're not exhibiting similar behavior. That's going to be a tough one for him.
Well, it is. I mean, I don't have a lot of, I've followed his career for a long time before there was even a thought that he was coming to the Canadian Football League. I think listen, he's a very talented football player. And listen, that's what happens in pro sports. Where you screw up, you get more chances and someone else will take a chance on you going forth. But in this case, and I'm not suggesting one of the other Canadian Football League teams would be jumping all over Chad Kelly. If he was reinstated and he wasn't with the Argos, I certainly wouldn't rule it out because as cynical as it is a results-based business, and he's a guy that has had some good results on the field, but he's created a black cloud over the Argos franchise right now, and some would say the league. And on top of it, Jeff, the way that it was handled by the Argos themselves, and I said this last week, I don't think there's anyone associated with the Canadian Football League, maybe ever, that had more goodwill with everybody than Michael Pinball Clemens. I mean, just the way he was as a player, the way he conducts himself, the sort of guy that he is. He used it all up and then some last week, and there's a lot of work for the Argos to do, I think, within their community, on top of what they already had to do to try to really establish themselves with a regular fan base and improve their things, their attendance and all that. He just compounded all of that last week with the way that it was handled and then the way he spoke to it.
Yeah, and so I think what that speaks to us is just the Argos, how do I say this, do things differently. And part of that answer is they don't care as much about the team as other communities, other ownership groups. I mean, MLSE, you've got to give them credit to a certain degree because, they bought a team that, they helped out the CFL when they purchased the Argonauts, right? I mean, this is their deep pockets. They're, you need they have a facility, they have everything you need. They're ideal owners. If they cared as much about the product as they do their other properties. I mean, it's pretty evident when you go to Air Canada Centre and you see, everybody, all the other logos and properties they own, including Toronto FC and the Argos are missing. And so, Bill Manning, the president of MLSE, I mean, is he your typical president? I would say Pinball Clemens is more your president because Pinball Clemens is not really your GM. That's John Murphy, who's your consultant, who's consultant by name because he, threw out a homophobic slur and got physical with fans, then lost his job during the East Final. So, like, you can't have him be, a public name. So he's the one. Mike Pinball Clemens is not scouting players, not going around and, that's John Murphy, and that's what he's doing. So he's then closest thing to the GM. So the responsibility of who falls, where it falls on seems muddied there, because I think a lot of people wanted to see representation from the top, not just the general manager. But, clearly in Pinball's, media availability, whether he just wasn't prepared, whether they don't have staff in and around him. And that's been one of the things that I find to be so interesting to me, whether it's Randy Ambrosie and his handlers and, the instances where he's gone up on stage and said things and you wonder, like, did anybody sit down with you and like coach you and like tell you about what would be coming? Like that's PR people's jobs, is to make sure you're prepared. And so it didn't look like Mike Pinball Clemens was all that prepared. And the other part too is it's unsure exactly how much information he has or has been interested in checking out. We know that the executive summary of the 87-page report, so the 10-page executive summary, is all that's been made public. Now, not public to you and I and general public. Now that got leaked, but it was sent to Chad Kelly's representatives. It was sent to the Argos, and I believe and of course it was sent to the to the female trainers representatives. So that's the information that's out there. But there's all this other information in the 87-page report that we don't have access to, and I think therein lies potentially, and why we'll probably never see that 87-page report, I would argue, is because I think in that report it shows a lot of what the Toronto Argonauts were responsible for, or what they did and didn't do during the process. And so, it is a bit of a complete mess. Obviously, I think there's, I just look at, I look at Pinball's comments about talking about his culture and how important it is, and some of his language minimized the actions of his quarterback. And I saw it less as Mike Pinball not caring and more so of Mike Pinball Clemens not knowing. And I don't know necessarily which one is worse in that. Yeah.
And a terrible reading of the room.
In that situation. And then on top of it, been like, you know what? You want to have Chad Kelly out there. You want to have him in Guelph. You want him to be part of the rookie camp and all those things. Maybe hide him in the building for a little bit longer. Like, or before your GM has to come out and explain himself and his organization through what is some pretty serious, allegations and what we've seen from the CFL's report. In some cases, some real notable proof behind it. So it's just, again, it's just the circus that is the CFL in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, fortunately, more often than not, the things you roll your eyes at, are things that you should probably roll your eyes at. And these kind of situations where you expect teams and leagues to be to know what they're doing, to be up to date on the information and to be able to speak clearly about it, to fall short on something like this is just, it's more than an eye roll. It's extremely disappointing.
Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press with us. Hammer, cannot wait to. Remis was just mentioning in the notes. There's a preseason game next Monday at this time at 3:30 in the afternoon. I guess it's May long weekend, so that makes sense. But not a lot of time before the guys get back on the field. Well, we'll be all over that, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you about it. Hey, on the way out, I have to ask you. What have you thought about this Canucks-Oilers series, as well as the end of Game 3? Listen, I think we all know Soucy's going to get a game or two, but how do you think that shapes Game number 4? And what sort of response do you expect from Edmonton, who are down 2-1 in this series and have to win that game?
Yeah, I'm with Sean, who mentioned before. I think the Oilers can play that physical, heavy game, and this is the best part. Everything just gets more magnified with each series as you get closer to, sipping from Lord Stanley's cup, that, everything matters a bit more. I mean, look at Pat Maroon and him being borderline emotional, talking about, the behavior or his actions after the Marchand hit. I mean, that's and then blaming reporters for having some kind of narrative as if that wouldn't exactly be his responsibility. But anyways, moving back to that other series, I just think it's, Edmonton's under a lot of pressure. They got a little bit of that Leafs feel to them in that, you have two of arguably the best players in the world on the same team, and to outshoot them the way they outshot Vancouver and still lose that game, that's got to be frustrating. But I expect this one to go 7 games. I expect the Oilers to answer back on this one. Obviously, they're at home again for another game, and to just try to, first of all, try to beat the goaltending in Vancouver, but more importantly, to just stay focused on the task at hand here and to try to just overwhelm them. That was the point at the beginning, and I think that's been tough to do against a Vancouver team that's more than happy to take the lead and kind of cocoon itself. I would argue that they need to play. I think Sean made that comment too. I think the Canucks need to play a little bit more, less protective hockey when they take the lead. But so far, it's been working for them. Sorry. And it's going to be a tough task for Edmonton, but I think they're up to it, and I could see this game for sure going 7 games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That shot clock, I think, was really deceiving. It kind of reminded me against some of those games like earlier on in the season when the Jets were, playing against Vegas and even Dallas, when, look, they're getting some pucks on net. They were just being held to the perimeter. And even with the talent that the Oilers bring to the table, they weren't able to get it inside. They weren't able to make it more difficult for Shilovs to make the saves. And of those 22, I think the high danger chances were 7-6 in the game. And in a game that where, the shot clock is so lopsided, you think, how does that make sense? But, the Oilers were taking what the Canucks gave them. They were more than happy to give them those long range stuff. And they didn't get inside to get rebounds or to make things happen, which is normally, a guy like Zach Hyman lives in that spot. He wasn't there, and they weren't able to get the puck to there. The first 5 minutes.
I thought you were going to ask me about Colorado and Dallas.
Well, feel free to chime in on that. We haven't really got to that series yet, but I thought that was the game that Dallas absolutely needed. I thought Colorado was in control of that series coming back home, and that win on Saturday night heading into tonight changes things significantly. This is a game that Colorado absolutely has to have.
That's just my quick comment on that series is look what Dallas is able to do by taking away the point, be able to take away their defenders. Colorado looks lost on the outside. And to be strong in front of the net, those are the two main things the Winnipeg Jets weren't able to do, and why they struggled so mightily against Colorado. Dallas has done in their wins. So that one's going to be a tight checking one too. I'm looking forward to see how that one pans out, because the Colorado Avalanche are going to, first of all, have the horses to adjust and have the coaching to adjust, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they reply in this next game.
Great stuff, Jeff. Hopefully we'll pop by and see you tonight. Thanks for doing this, and we'll look forward to more Bomber coverage with you and the team at the Winnipeg Free Press throughout the week.
That's my plan. I'll be down at TCB with the rest of the crew, and hopefully it's a fun night.
Good stuff. There it is. Jeff Hamilton of the Free. Thanks, Hammer, as always. I'm just wrapping my head around the fact that there's a preseason game next week for the Bombers. Now, this one's on the road. They've got the home game the following week. And at that point, it's game on again for Bomber fans at Princess Auto Stadium. And, of course, at Princess Auto Stadium, you will find the best in Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, which is, of course, the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, proudly supporting the Bombers in WST for the last 4 years. And, shall we say, getting Bomber fans the juice behind themselves to be the best group in the Canadian Football League. We'll see you around the Rum Hut. We'll have some CC and Gingers at the games this year. But in the meantime, if you are popping by your local Manitoba liquor marts, make sure to check out the Canadian Club display and all of Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, the good stuff, Canadian Club, since 1848. I just got a text from our pal Greg over at Royal Sports. Now, this upcoming weekend is the long weekend. The following weekend, the 25th and 26th, mark it on your calendar, the first Royal Sports tent sale of the year. There really is nothing like a Royal Sports tent sale. Thousands and thousands of pairs of shoes and pieces of merchandise, all marked down at least 50%. I know you Winnipeggers love a good deal, and there's nothing like the deals available at Royal Sports. So not this weekend, but the following weekend, another Royal tent sale. And in the meantime, pop by, for all your favorite licensed merchandise from around the world of pro sports and the best in equipment to get you outside having a great time. Spring stock is arriving daily. Soccer, baseball, softball, tennis equipment, running, and a huge selection of bikes. Pop by and see them today and in a couple weeks for the tent sale, 750 Pembina Highway. And give them a follow on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina. Hey, Boston Pizza is the place to be tonight and every night throughout the Stanley Cup Playoffs, because that's where fans get together to cheer on their favorite teams, or in some cases, maybe cheer against their most hated teams. They've got the brand new playoff menu, which includes the wing flights, the Sicilian square footer pizza, and my personal favorite, the jalapeno popper dip. And in addition to being able to win great prizes through their regular promos all playoffs long, you'll have the opportunity to enter to win a grand prize of a trip for two to the Stanley Cup Final. So get your crew together, get on down to BP tonight and throughout the week for Stanley Cup playoff hockey and a chance to win your way to the Stanley Cup Final. And hey, I got to shout out my friends at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. Just making plans to get out there on the weekend. Cannot wait to get to Aikens. Always some 3 of my favorite days of the entire year. And if you're looking for a world-class fly-in fishing getaway right here in Manitoba, where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens is the spot. World-class fishing, even more world-class hospitality from the Terren family and the Aikens team. Find out more online about options for the 2024 season and availability for the rest of the year. And you can also check them out on all their social feeds at Aikens Lake. All right, let's get Remis back in here. We are going to get to Coolbet Lines in a minute for these games, but we spent so much time right off the bat with the update on the Jets coaching search, as well as the odds for those individuals. We just kind of scratched the surface of the playoffs, Reem. And listen, I think the Edmonton-Vancouver series is the one that people are paying the most close attention to, despite the fact that they're always seemingly late games. But as Jeff brought up, I mean, a pretty impressive performance by the Dallas Stars. And I couldn't help to echo what Jeff had to say. Watching that game on Saturday night, especially the third period on Saturday night when the Stars were playing with the lead, maybe they learned a few things from watching the tape of Winnipeg and Colorado, because they had a much better answer in game number 3 than they had, frankly, in either of the first 2 games when the Avalanche sort of exerted their will and came back in both games, although only getting the split.
Yeah, at times you think that this one's going 7, but Dallas has had a big lead in like all the games, and if not for that big Colorado comeback, Dallas could be up 3-0. And Dallas's defense, this addition of Chris Tanev for not that huge of a price. I agree. That and the Zadorov acquisition looking like the most impactful ones. And that was an interesting question to Rennie's thing. How much, would the Jets season have changed if they would have got those 2 guys instead of the guys they got now? We're using hindsight here, but you're seeing, how strong their defense is, how good they are at moving the puck. I mean, Miro Heiskanen, he's up there in points this playoffs. He's been incredible leading them. So full credit to Dallas, and they seem to be on their way here. The next one, now there's game 4 coming up tonight, but I think this series is, the Dallas-Vegas series, and now the Dallas Avs has been the best hockey that we've seen from any of the series so far.
Well, I'll throw the Rangers-Carolina in there. And every game has been 1 goal so far, and it looked a little lopsided because it was 3-0 after 3 games. But if you'd actually watch the games, this has been like just a razor-thin margin. And I still think that game 2 of that series, to be honest, might be the best game we've seen so far in the playoffs, the one that went to double OT. But the Canes did get a very important win, Reem, and listen, I think that they're good enough to get this one back to Carolina. The Rangers have the opportunity to win it on home ice. They just lost their first game of the playoffs. But again, a couple bounces go a different way, and we could be talking about an entirely different series right now. And the one thing that I know we can count on when we're talking about the Carolina Hurricanes is that there will be no quit in Rod the Bod's team, and they will do everything they can from the start of the puck drop to the final buzzer to make sure that if they do go out, they go out with their best. I'm kind of leaning towards a Carolina win tonight, and then potentially the Rangers get it done in Game 6. If not, I would love to see these teams go 7 games, and the nature of it being 3-0, and again, we're kind of getting us ahead of ourselves right now. But the momentum can turn pretty quickly, and I do wonder how much the Canes get from getting one on the Rangers and now having the opportunity to stay alive again tonight on the road.
Yeah, you're right. It's been very close. Every game going to overtime, and Carolina finally getting a win. They did the goalie swap in Game 3, went back in Game 4 to Freddie Anderson. Wasn't spectacular, but was good enough to get the win. Special teams not really playing a factor. They did finally score on the power play in Game 4. Huss 1 for 2. Rangers going 0 for 1 in special teams. Penalties been a huge discussion here in the second round, and Carolina, we know that they're a very good team. They're favored coming in, but the Rangers were able to win those close games and take that 3-0 lead. So we'll see what happens here in Game 5. But I agree with you that Carolina is certainly good enough, to come back and keep forcing extra games. We'll see if you could do it 3 times in a row. It gets tough, but hey, the Rangers won 3. Carolina could certainly do it.
The team in the most trouble right now is the Boston Bruins, and last night they had that great start. They were up 2-0, but it kind of did feel like it was inevitable that Florida was going to get back into it, and that one would be tight. And not only did they get back into it, they ended up getting another one in the third period and winning. And, the Bruins were already depleted from what they were last year. And then to lose a player like Brad Marchand, and listen, we all know Marchand's a rat and has done a whole bunch of nefarious things to opponents throughout the years. Sam Bennett is that dude on the other team right now. And in true Marchand fashion, gets away with something that hurts a player on the other team. In this case, it was Brad Marchand. And then scores an incredibly controversial goal that Boston failed on a challenge of. I don't know about you. I was convinced that one was coming back because of the cross-check by Bennett. It didn't, and that just further incensed the Boston Bruins, who actually had their general manager Don Sweeney, do a press conference today in the middle of a series, which is very rare, essentially getting to the point. I mean, he didn't just break out the checkbook and go fire and brimstone for a big fine, but did push forward the notion that there'd be nice to be a little accountability from the officials and hear from them after NHL games in the playoffs.
I'm shocked that no coach or GM in this playoffs has come out and just eaten the fine. I don't know. They're told not to speak out against officiating. And look, Boston certainly got outplayed, outshot. And Sam Bennett, he's a guy that I don't really like the way he conducts himself on the ice. You saw he gave Matthew Nyes the choke slam last year. I thought that was pretty lame. And he goes in and gives Brad Marchand just a sucker punch in the face and knocks him out. And I agree. I don't think anyone's feeling bad for Brad Marchand. He's done his share of dirty stuff. So, if you give it, you got to be able to take it, I guess. But as far as goal, the interference, who knows? You don't know what it's going to be. Maybe Charlie Coyle should have stood his ground and not got, fallen over so easily from the cross check from Sam Bennett. I don't know. Is it because it's a cross check and not like a regular getting body position? They can overturn it. I don't know. Are you overturning interference or overturning that it was?
Did you think that goal was going to count when they challenged it?
Probably not. But
yeah, I was expecting them to say no goal. From similar instances beforehand, it's pretty clear that if you do something to move the defender into the goaltender, particularly with an illegal move like a cross check, that to me is the definition of goalie interference, although there's just someone else involved in it. So yeah, that was a bit of a head scratcher. I know Boston was pissed off about it, but they got to figure out a way to get this series back to Boston. Florida, in the meanwhile, has the opportunity to take care of their opponent in 5 games and move on to the conference final against either the Rangers or the Hurricanes, depending on what happens in games 5 through 7.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a major reuniting of former Winnipeg Jets if it is Rangers, Panthers. The Panthers, man, they're looking like they're ready to go back to the Cup final. You talk about scar tissue and lessons learned. I think Florida has learned some lessons after losing earlier, or is Matthew Tkachuk fully healthier and he was injured? Last one, I do have to point out Mike McIntyre. Did you see this on X over the weekend?
I'm not sure.
Okay, Mike McIntyre tweeted out, just pointing out what we've been talking about here on this show. We're getting closer to an Eastern Conference final of Paul Maurice, Dmitry Kulikov, and Kevin Stenlund versus Blake Wheeler, Jacob Trouba, and Jack Roslovic. And he did forget about Jamie Compton, who's on the bench. And then some deranged individual thought he was reading between the lines, said, trying to create something again, Mike? Leading people to think the Jets would have gone further with these players is a little disingenuous when you pick and choose. No one on that list is better than what we have other than Trouba, and we know why he left. And then he went on. What about all the former? He went on, but like, I couldn't believe that someone would jump to the
quite
conclusion
the theory.
because
I don't think that's what Mike was getting at. It was just more interesting.
No, and then Mike responded, "In what universe does my factual tweet noting 6 Jets alumni could be facing off for a trip to the finals me suggesting the Jets would have gone further with those players?" So I just found that very entertaining. I guess you got to watch out what you put out there on X, because anyone can interpret it any way they want.
We'll get to the bottom of Mike McIntyre's agenda on X tomorrow when he joins us on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
I'm sure Mike has a lot to say. And
I'll hold his feet to the fire for this one, pointing out just the factual information of players that are on Florida and on the New York Rangers.
Well, I was going to say, Mike, you forgot to mention, what we're seeing in Vancouver right now. Tyler Myers against Evander Kane and Mark Stewart on Edmonton. Mark Stewart on the bench of the Oilers. So there are some former Jets in action in the playoffs, and I wonder if we will see one of them lift this. What about Paul Maurice? If we see him lifting the Stanley Cup, I mean, what a
I know there's a lot of people that are really pulling for Maurice. There's some that are at the other end of the spectrum. I'm sort of in the middle. I mean, I do have a lot of respect for Maurice, of the career that he's had, of how long he's coached, and there is part of me that thinks, hey, he's devoted his entire life to this. It would be a great story for him to win. There's also part of me that still doesn't really have a good feeling about the way he left the Winnipeg Jets, the state of the Jets when he left, and the amount of work that Rick Bowness and Scott Arniel and their staff had to do to really move past that era and that horrible final season in which he walked out in November. But there's no doubt that we all still watch the post-game pressers, and Maurice is feeling it right now. He's got that level of confidence, borderline on cocky, when he's dealing with the media. And you know what? His team has maybe given him that opportunity to do that, because they have played at an incredibly high level all season long, and are fully in control of this series with the Boston Bruins. Listen, we're going to get to the Coolbet Lines in just a minute. Actually, I'll touch quickly on the NBA playoffs as well, but a quick Breezy Bend golf report for you. I'll tell you what, Breezy Bend is in beautiful shape right now. Incredible staff out there getting the course ready to go this early in May. If you are thinking about an unbelievable home for your family on the golf course, as well as practice facility, wonderful clubhouse and facilities and more, you can go to breezybend.ca for more information about the waiting list and getting on board with Breezy next year. Also a great spot for weddings and more. breezybend.ca. If you're given a call to ask for our pal Corey Johnson, who will help you all about that. Rory McIlroy's back, and he was back big time. He did double a nothing hole at the end. He had a 7-shot lead going into the 18th yesterday at the Wells Fargo Championship. And Rory with a big win heading into Major Week. PGA Championship gets going on Thursday. in a pretty good spot. We'll get to those odds in a minute because Rory is the second favorite behind. Guess who? New dad, Scotty Scheffler, heading into the PGA. And man, a tough start for the Goldeyes. I've been following these Goldeyes games down in Cleburne throughout the week, and they have been right there. Lost on a walk-off homer on Saturday to lose 5-4, and then heck of a pitching duel yesterday, losing 1-0 to Cleburne. Now, still looking for that first win, but all the games have been incredibly close, and I do think that Cleburne's got quite a squad as well. We're going to see a Goldeyes team that once they get home from this 2-week road trip to start the season might have a little bit of catching up to do. But I think Logan Watkins has some real players on his club right now and cannot wait for opening day on May 21st. Get your tickets now and go to goldeyes.com for more information on the new options when it comes to groups, such as the new patio decks. And again, stay tuned to Winnipeg Sports Talk. We're just finalizing a date for the WST patio party out at the Goldeyes, which hopefully you will all join us for. Again, goldeyes.com for more on that. Back in Cleburne tonight in Game 5 of the series. And Remis, you know what a week today is?
It's the Bombers' first preseason game.
And opening day of Assiniboia Downs. We may actually have to make our first plays on Friday or over the weekend. I'm not missing a chance to get a few winners. I was actually warming up on the HPI Bet app this weekend, Reem. I was 2 for 2 in just going into a couple random races and making a couple bets. The great thing about that, too, is if you're on HPI Bet, you can watch the races live as well right there. So live racing at Assiniboia Downs is back next Monday and Tuesday for the first 2 weeks, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday throughout the year. And we'll also be doing a WST night at Assiniboia Downs later on in the summer. So hopefully you can join us for that. It should be a heck of a lot of fun. All right, let's get over the Coolbet lines. You know, if you miss this right out of the gate, we actually have odds right now for the Winnipeg Jets' next head coach. Coolbet has those up right now. Scott Arniel is the favorite at -250. Todd McClelland +350. Craig Berube 8-1. Todd Nelson +850. Jay Woodcroft 9-1. Ryan Warhofsky 10-1. And David Carl 15-1. Berube also happens to be the favorite for the Leafs job. I'm just pulling up the Leafs specials here. Berube at even money, +100. McClellan at 2-1. Gerard Gallant 8-1. Boudreau 11. Woodcroft 12. Quenneville 13. Daryl Sutter 15. Wouldn't
No.
Daryl Sutter in Toronto? That would be incredible. Guy Boucher 15. Don't bet Guy Boucher, considering their special teams and how much heat he was getting for the power play in the playoffs. I would not include him. Rod Brindamore at 15. He's still got a job right now. And Dean Evison at 16-1. So if you want to have a little fun with coaching wagering, there you have it right now. As far as the games go for tonight, the Canes and Rangers are playing at MSG. That one gets going just after 6 p.m. And the Rangers, it's a straight up pick 'em. Carolina -108, Rangers -108. And the Dallas Stars are in Colorado. Avalanche -134, Stars +114. Tell you what, Reem, I like the Avs to win this game tonight and make this series 2-2. And I'll be honest, I think the Carolina Hurricanes get this series to a Game 6.
Wow. I mean, you just got to take it one game at a time when you're down 3-1. I'm sure Carolina is capable. Will they be able to pull it off? I mean, Shesterkin, he's been excellent. They got to get that power play going, and they did win the special teams battle last game, and that continues. So it's tough. And MSG, yes, they got that goal song there that gets everyone going. We'll have to see. In Colorado, I don't know. I think Dallas has really shown they can take it to Colorado. Obviously, they got the home ice now. They are a slight favorite, but maybe go with Dallas +114. Florida was a team. I thought Boston was going to take it to them. They're up 2-0 yesterday, and full credit to Florida, who stormed back. Will we see another 3-1 series. So, but
that was a nice live bet opportunity yesterday.
Yeah.
To be honest, because I mean, Florida, there's shots like the Oilers were getting on the Canucks, and then there's shots like the Panthers were getting on Jeremy Swayman. And it just sort of felt like it was a matter of time before they were going to get back into it, and that's exactly what they did. Series prices right now, before we drop the puck tonight, the Hurricanes are plus 500, and the Rangers minus 714 to win the series. And the Avalanche now, you can get the Avalanche at plus 190, and the Dallas Stars at minus 233. The Canucks-Oilers series is very close. Vancouver now, with the win last night, a slight favorite at minus 112. If you believe in the Oilers and think they're going to get it done, minus 104. Pretty nice number for a team that was like minus 270 going into the playoffs. So all the hockey is there. NBA playoffs tonight. And by the way, shout out to the Denver Nuggets. All my Nuggets futures look like they were burnt after the Nugs lost the first 2 games at home. They go into the Twin Cities on the weekend and win both. And now it's a best of 3. The defending champion Nuggets have games 5 and 7 at home in a much, much better place. Celtics are a big favorite tonight. 9-point road favorites in Cleveland against the Cavs. Minus 357 on the money line. And the OKC Thunder taking on the Dallas Mavericks. Love OKC in this spot. I think this series gets evened up. OKC plus 102 on the money line. The Mavs minus 120. And then tomorrow we'll get back to it with the Knicks and the Pacers, Nuggets and T-Wolves. Both series are locked up at 2. PGA Championship odds are out right now. And as I mentioned, the favorite for the PGA, the second major, would be the guy that won the first, Scottie Scheffler. With the new baby having been delivered, he will be ready to go. He's plus 450. Rory McIlroy plus 775 after his great performance on the weekend at the Wells Fargo. Xander Schauffele 14-1. Brooks Koepka 16-1. Ludwig Oberg and John Rahm 20-1. They've got a great majors contest as well. If you are making any bets at Coolbet on the PGA Championship, make sure to click the option to include it in the majors contest. They've got some great prizes set up there as well. And let's just quickly take a look at the exclusives. I did put together a ride with Huss today, combining both the NHL and the NBA. I like the Hurricanes to win. I like the Avalanche to win and the Oklahoma City Thunder to win. That was plus 590. It's boosted to plus 675. You can get that in the exclusive sections. And Patty knows puck is back as well. He's got 1 point for Arturi Lekkinen, 3 or more shots for Tyler Seguin, and a point for Sebastian Aho, plus 400. So 4-1 on that. And as far as today goes, there's about 10 different NHL daily exclusives available and 4 cross-sport ones as well. All there waiting for you over at coolbet.com. If you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. And we didn't even get into the majors today, Reem. The Jays coming off a disappointing end to their series against the Twins in Baltimore to take on the Orioles. And there's a lot of people right now watching the Jays, despite that wild comeback they had on, what was it, Saturday, being down 7-1 and winning 10-8 or 10-9. This is the team that cannot string wins together, continually disappointing. And it was another one last night against the Twins. At what point will we see big changes of the Jays is starting to becoming the story of the season, not can they get back into it?
Yeah, they have this huge payroll, Huss, and it's completely gone off the rails. You brought in Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins after Alex Anthopoulos to bring in this long-term sustainable winning. They were so mad he traded away all these prospects, and now you look at them now, they have this huge high payroll and really no future to look forward to. What are they going to do, at the deadline? Some names already being mentioned. Jordan Romano, closer, rumored Boston interested. That's Bob Nightingale reporting on that. And if you want to learn about the Jays, we had Josh Goldberg on last week, us from The Score, talking about, I think you could just replay that now, and he would probably say the same thing. So you can go to last week's show.
Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. We're just saying, yeah, Josh Goldberg's coming up.
Yeah.
We can just play that interview. Everything that he said last week, still the status quo right now. Yeah. We'll see what happens with Vlad and Bo. Vlad actually has been hitting a bit more, which has been nice. But there's a lot of guys that need to pick it up. George Springer having a miserable season right now. Schneider's still throwing him out, batting leadoff at times. It makes absolutely no sense. But I see some people change the skipper. They could do that. But I think the problems of the Blue Jays are far beyond just decision-making by John Schneider.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff with the lineup. Like, they won't take Springer out of the leadoff. Davis Schneider's been their best hitter. And it's like, oh, you hit a home run. Oh, sorry, you're getting the next day off. I think that happened with Danny Jansen on the weekend as well. Like, they're not getting
Ernie Clement too. It's driving people nuts.
They're not getting what they need out of their, their big bats. But you have stuff like that. It just seems weird when you're like, yeah, great, great hit, and then you're out of the lineup. But they did change the lineup for today. It looks like Davis Schneider is leading off. Springer getting a day off.
Beautiful.
And Varsho batting second, Guerrero and Jet. So we'll wait and see. But it seems like the Blue Jays, this is going to be a lost season. Like, they'll be, a 500 team, and maybe some changes will end up coming. But people not very optimistic, maybe getting more on the indifferent side. But hey, you know what? The ballpark looks great. How about those Reynolds? Hey, do you see that new backstop behind the catcher? How sweet those fake stone walls look. Oh man, it's great.
I just want to get out there for one of the Looney Dog days.
Yes.
At some point. Check out the new ballpark. Kind of resigned to the fact that this isn't going to be a playoff team this year. And go have a couple beers and eat a dozen $1 hot dogs. Full Joey Chestnut at the game. So that I hope to do that at some point this season. And tickets, I mean, as much as the ballpark has just met rave reviews, with the team playing like this, resale market a little bit better for people that need to get last-minute tickets. So, anyways, we'll see how they do tonight. 18-22 on the season right now, and they're going into Baltimore, who is 26-13. Barrios on the hill, who has been really good this season for the Blue Jays, against Corbin Burns. Good stuff. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, one more. So on Friday we talked about that report, if that was a report from Steve Dangle, about the Major League Hockey that he deleted the next day, and it seemed like everyone and a lot of reporters like David Pagnotta and others, Alan Walsh, were saying how they were hearing about this. So there was some real reporting done by Brad Schlossman in the Grand Forks Herald.
Grand Forks.
Saying that Thursday night YouTuber Steve Dangle reported a new pro league was set to begin. They had 16 teams, $30 million salary. Alan Walsh was retweeting it, and some guy named Max Chambers was listed as this document that had been circulating. What is the CEO and chairman, and that the document they shared has $10 billion to guarantee the first 5 years. And everyone thought, oh, where is this money coming from? Is it coming from like hockey's version of LIV, from the PIF?
The Saudis? Yeah.
And then so Brad Schlossman looked like, who's this guy, Max Chambers? And he's a mystery man. He tried to buy the Blues in 2011, but wasn't considered. They couldn't find, the Globe and Mail couldn't find any information around him then. Records of him trying to buy other sports teams. In a 2009 story, it said he was an oil tycoon who's interested in the Coyotes. But there really isn't anything out of him. And if it was, the PIF, giving him money, don't you think they would give it to someone who is more high profile, like Greg Norman was in LIV? And so Brad actually called up this Max Chambers, and he wouldn't answer any questions. He asked for proof to say, is this like a real thing? And for example, he's sending documents saying there's arena deals in place or pending in 16 markets. Well, Brad Schlossman did real reporting and called every arena that holds over 6,000 seats in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. No one ever heard of him. He said, give the name of one single arena he's worked on so they could verify there's a deal. He would not say the deals were being worked on. So there's no trademark filing for Major League Hockey. So he says that they haven't showed any reason to believe they're legitimate, and anyone approached should give it full skepticism. So I don't know why Steve Dangle took the time to record a 5-minute video.
Breaking news.
Yeah. So weird. So that was, I'm bringing this up because maybe you're watching the show. We spent 5-6 minutes talking about it because of Steve Dangle, and we recorded with Scott Billick.
It took over.
You guys talked about, yeah.
Everything that night, I guess that was last Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
Was about this report. And listen, Steve's got a huge audience and following, and when someone like that, even if he's not a big J, comes out with information on that, people are going to start talking about it. And the fact that he had never done anything like that before was either he's getting paid by these guys to float this thing out and sort of be behind it, which I guess is possible. And when you're talking about potential Saudi money, they'll pay anybody to, move their projects along, as we've seen. But it was just such a out of character, weird thing for Dangle to do. And then by the time we were doing the show the next day,
yeah,
he had already deleted it and put up a post saying, we've since found some information not to be correct. It sounds pretty pie in the sky. I said, as someone that's worked in pro sports before and has been involved in off seasons of starting a new team, I can tell you that the amount of work that goes into it behind the scenes is massive for one team. Never mind an entire new league. So to be sort of hearing about this in the middle of May, getting close to June, without anything being concrete, you can kiss it goodbye for this season. And I guess it's going to be funny if in 6 months we look back and remember there was that 2-day period where we were talking about this thing that never came about. It could go away. We'll never hear about it again. Or maybe they need more time if they really have the money. But it doesn't sound like anything's legit so far. Literally at any point of this story, from the beginning of Dangle dropping it to people asking questions to where we are today, with nothing. So Alan Walsh, I know, was all fired up about the influx of $30 million a team for 16 teams for the client. You might have to just negotiate with the NHL in today's world right now, because I don't think that's coming anytime soon for any available players.
Yeah, so I thought we just wanted to clear that up because we spent so much time. And before we go, good luck to the Winkler Flyers. Take on Oakville Blades tonight. A win in regulation will solidify their spot in the playoff round. So shout out to the Winkler Flyers at the Centennial Cup tonight.
Yeah, the Winkler, man, they had a tough game on the weekend, but they lost in a shootout, so they still do get points. So Winkler, after that first win, right off the hop, and they got the host team, the Oakville Blades, as you can see today. And by the way, give the Flyers a follow. They've been doing a great job at throwing up updates of the event. It's such listen, I had my brother played in this event before. It is such a cool event for a lot of players that, might be finishing up their junior hockey careers that, may go on to play, U Sports hockey, or, in Dalton Andrews' case, he just signed with UND. But a lot of guys, it's sort of the end of the road for them. And, it is a true national championship, with all the provinces, with the exception of BC, that kind of went rogue and started their own league. So listen, representing the province, the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, everybody behind the Winkler Flyers. So good luck to the fellas tonight, and we'll stay on top of that throughout the week. That is going to do it for us today, gang. Tomorrow, much more in the Stanley Cup playoffs, as well as the Jets offseason. Mike McIntyre is going to jump on with us. Liz Hood's going to jump on with us as well. And we're going to actually touch on the PWHL. They had a triple overtime game on the weekend, Reem. I don't know if you saw the game sheet, but there was one player played 59 minutes, one player played 61 minutes, and then some others that barely got on the ice. So the coach is really riding their stars right now. in that series between Montreal and Boston. Toronto up 2-0 on Minnesota. So we're going to hit all of that, as well as touch on event over at Next Door on 116 Sherbrooke for what should be a fun way to kick off the first ever PWHL Championship Series with a little watch party and an event for game number 1. So make sure to join us tomorrow on the program. We'll look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, have a good time tonight at TCB for everybody attending. Thanks to Rennie for jumping on, Jeff Hamilton as well. And make sure to say hi if you see us tonight. And if not, we will see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock, live on YouTube, later in the afternoon on your podcast feed, right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Huge thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, and all of you for making us a part of yours. Have a great Monday night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.